So what have been told, and the important how was it, who was the author and who is narrator, and different things, and we should differentiate between that, and who is the character. So from the first person or from the third person, it's very important, and in all responses, feedbacks, and reviews, it was one and the same work, unpretentious. His style is unpretentious. He has very simple style, and this is a plain English. If you teach English, you are free to give it to your students, and they will understand it. It's without any abridgment. You can put it as a reading book. And what does it mean for me if I use the simple language? How I will differentiate from the primitive language? Albert Einstein told that theory should be as simple as it can be, but not the primitive, said he after the pregnant pause. We should identify the tone. When I was in the secondary school, now it is my favorite performance. We had a music lessons, and we had a teacher named Svetlana Ivanivna, and she used the following method. She put play at 40th Symphony by Mozart and asked us to use the language to describe this music. And the winner was who wrote more. It was a quantitative approach to the assignment, and of course I won, and I had best marks in music, but it was the use of my word count ability. And once the teacher heard that we talk anecdotes, and she was furious, angry, and she started yelling at us, "You are telling jokes about the revolutionary heroes, and even don't know that in the United States there is a Langley city where special trained people make these jokes for you not to respect your past." And I came back home, and I was almost unconsciousness, and I came back home and I asked my father, what Langley does mean? What does Langley mean? And my father was the fan of the international programs about international things, and I learned about the CIA headquarters. So if it didn't happen, I wouldn't know about the headquarters of CIA. In the next grade, we had another teacher of music, and he really taught me how to like the classical music. And he was genius. He had opposite method. There was a 40th Mozart symphony, and we should write 3 words, but they should identify more exactly what words can describe the book of Feynman's book, sparkling, witty, and charming. We say sparkling, witty, and charming. And how book a translation should be, how the plain style can be sparkling, witty, and charming. And here we understand about the very big continent of meaning. We're not translating the text, we're translating emotion, which famous evoke in our readers. The reader should have fun, the reader should understand it. Wow, it's very good, because the name of the book, surely you are joking, Mr. Feynman, and in the Russian translation, of course you are joking, Mr. Feynman. There is a very soft error in Russian. The better translation was "You are dare to joke, Mr. Feynman." And now we're talking about the second pop, the most tasty, and I would like to share it. So this is a logo of our conference, and I met your standards. Please don't go away. It will be interesting. There are the cornerstones, the verbs, the metaphors and allusions, and I paid attention, was focused on that. So she said, and what should we do with that? It's very simple question, but it sometimes make the translator stumble and fall. These words has no textual signal. This is textual noise, that's why we can get rid of them, but not always. And here you can see the examples. Now it is the discussion of the translation into the Ukrainian language.
Можно ли использовать это слово в нобелевском звании, переводя нобелевского лауреата или корнистого банка? Я говорю, нет, ребята, я знаю, что я делаю. Feynman всю жизнь хотел...
Now it is the explanation that Feynman dreamed to visit Tuvan Republic, and he wanted to get visa, and his friend wrote a book, Tuva or Death. And he was opened the visa, but he didn't manage to visit Tuva. And I understand that he knew this word to have a rain dance. And I understand it. And of course, this is beyond contextual knowledge, from the recollections, from the interviews, from the different programs. So I know about Feynman more than he wrote about himself in this book. That's why the ways how I translate it, I understand these ways in the general discourse. Then again, the explanation how to translate. He's talking to Japanese, and they understand. So we fenced about 30 minutes. There is no fencing in the English word, but I use it in the Ukrainian translation because the text is alive. To make translation good, we should be the closest and to have the most liberty with the text. We cannot translate word for word, because this is the life of the author, and it's not was just the literal life, it was the very funny life. Again, next discussion of the translation, explanation that it was translated by the sport metaphor. I like them because they are very deep, and of course I was and the context was that they calculated in their mind. For example, I give you the task 20 multiplied by 2, and you get the answer and give me another task. And he said, I was sank. What kind of metaphor is it? Don't be afraid. The origin of this metaphor. This is from boxing. When you have a punch into your head and you just have a blended picture, a merged picture, and this is understood that this is a competition, a boxing in calculation. I was cheating. I used my hand to get better results, etc., etc. The examples of the translation of different metaphors using the sport language are being discussed right now.
То есть оторваться на целый корпус — это очень много.
Sometimes the question is bound to arise. Oh, okay, dude, you are the fan of the sport, and the reader will be able to recognize your metaphor. That, for example, you got the horse, if horse ahead, horse body ahead, and I had a Leo Vygotsky theory about that the book should be a little bit complicated than the reader knows, and the book just train the reader, and it's very important. You should be focused on that, to have the motivated metaphors, contextually motivated metaphors, and on the other hand, it should be from the same planet that your readers inhabit. And in all my translations, I replace baseball examples with tennis examples. For example, in Stephen Hawking book, he's some physical things he understands. He explains on the flying of the baseball ball, and Hawking explains it on the example of the tennis ball. And of course, you understand that these are different things. We cannot replace baseball for tennis without any being a sinner, and I'm safe on that side. But again, the context should allow doing that. Okay. When he got the Nobel Prize, he was invited into non-targeted audiences just to show him as the Nobel Prize winner. And so I have an audience of 300 children, young children. All these sport metaphors and all of a sudden dialogues make this text a life story. And the word unpretensions, I do not use it in the direct meaning. I understand it as a life, not boring, but not some lexically dull text. If we compare the vocabulary of the original source text and the target text will have much more vocabulary and it will be richer. Who invites Smiley? And who can guess? I can give you the prize. Probably Mr. Feynman himself. Listen. It was 250. I can give you a tip. This year we're going to celebrate 50 years anniversary of the Smiley in the April, so Walt Whitman asks, what how do you rank yourself among writers living in of the immediate past? Walt Whitman asks Mr. Nabokov. I often think there should exist a special typographical sign for a smile, some sort of concave mark, a supine round bracket, which I would now like to trace and reply to your question. This is a quote from, it was invented by Nabokov, coined by Nabokov, and this is, it was 50 years ago, and it was my first translation when I used smiley as the element of making a life. So now you are set far and now you are suffering because you cannot see. And the context is the following.
To Kotekot comes a young blonde, and she belongs to the kind of people who usually create wow effect, and And she invited him to the lecture, but he didn't want to come, but she was beautiful, and he noticed it and he agreed. It didn't have to, but it helped. And smile means it gives intonation. It's very useful. Then in other books we saw that it becomes fashion. Yes, it's self-irony. In the original there is no smile. And now a question arises. Can I put a smile into the text of Feynman? If maybe I'm trying to show off, but I would give you the following answer. A translator can do everything during translation work in case he knows what he is doing. Yes, please. Microphone, please. Yes, this is a typographic game because a smile becomes a part of the bracket which exists, which has in the text, and I make this bracket a smile. I turn it into a smile, and I believe that this is rather professional. This is the demonstrational translation, and thus I show my colleagues what we can do. Why, for example, Tarantino's film Pulp Fiction is a great film, because this film changed the language of cinema, and I liked Tarantino's answer on some questions, and he was asked why you didn't make something of this kind after Pulp Fiction, and he gave the only answer: who did it? My favorite topic is Yiddishism. Unfortunately I do not know the Yiddish language. I like this language because geographically I was near the Jewish settlement, and I like to insert Yiddish words, and when all Ukrainians understand what we are talking about, and when the publishing house gave the testing version to the test version to the reader, usually such readers report on mistakes if they see any, and and all of my Yiddishism, Yiddish words were marked as mistakes by such reader, and I asked them, what the hell, idiot, you have taken as a tester. And as for Yiddishisms in this translation, yes, they can be used because he originates from a Jewish family, and for any pattern, any page of this text I'm responsible, and really I treat it very responsibly to this text, and all decisions are weighted, and I took this method from Nabokov because he never used words occasionally, and this approach made him genius because he never used words occasionally just by chance. And the context is as follows: he comes to the conference in New York, and he is put into the just to New York to the conference, and he is put to live next to the people who came just to work in New York, to very simple people, and these people belong to Jewish nationality, and they were asking him questions, and they started asking him questions, and he answered their questions just using his knowledge of physics, and better was. If you translate, they were 10 times better than me, it will not be Feynman. It will be very direct translation. translation. And if you compare to this translation, comic effect will be made due to translation from the first person to the third person. And for example, if he describes a lecture from the first person, and when he is asked, what would you say about it with Mr. Feynman, and he says that Feynman is not going to go on such thin ice. And when a person speaks about himself or herself from the third person, it creates a very funny effect, comic effect. I also, in my book, I also write a paragraph how to make your the book funny. And how can we learn to be funny? How can we learn humor? This is very standard point. And for example, the wolf and
Playing words in Russian language where different proverbs are mixed. The major part of the action in the book is in Ithaca city, where the Cornell University is located. This is the Ivy League university. It's very prestige and famous, and this is kind of Ithaca. And what kind of Ithaca? Another Ithaca. Do you know another Ithaca? Yes, the place where Odysseus was born, and this is the Greece place. This is American, and this is the true Ithaca. This is the settlement Ithaca of Chita region of the Russian Federation. When Odysseus was waited for certain long road back home. So yes, I'm not joking. You can check it on Wikipedia. With Wikipedia, really, this is true Ithaca. And now we have the word combination in Ithaca. And I changed from in into on. Now he's explaining the tricks and craft of the translating from English into Ukrainian. And how he shows the example. So I on board from the ship on the station Ithaca, station and the ship, and it makes fun. And I carry the heavy truck on my shoulder, and I listen to the voice, "Taxi, sir." And now the next scene in the hostel, and he comes to the hostel, and he is told, "Dude, there is a problem with the rooms in Ithaca." And I like these allusions. This is a kind of the trick to make the actions and make them. And I use allusions to do this. So if you are fan Nabokov's fan, you can read it. You can. If you read Name of Rosa and not as Umberto Eco read it, you will have the same quantity of the pleasure. You need to. Now again the translation, the example of the translation of this sentence you can see on the slide. You have to understand that in those days people hardly knew what a physicist was, and Stein was known as the mathematician. So the first row have the most expensive places. Now he is explaining what allusion is here. He is asking, and this is allusion to the article of Mykola Grushevsky, as he is famous that he on the 50 hryvnias note, his portrait is on his 50 hryvnias note. So now we understood who are Ukrainians and what do they want next. And this is the book. by Mikhailo Grushevsky. And it's very easy answer that someone wants to bribe him to. So, and he answers that try to bribe him. What should you do to make books? I read books and I read everything. Every book, and I haven't read anything about the books, and this is the part of the swear in the American court. So Americans probably will recognize it. This is the outed states, and he describes this is the 60s. So in California, hippies, LSD, people took LSD, and they got back from the trip. So, dude, you have something, you cannot believe in that, and okay, I can watch it by myself. He didn't use LSD, he used the chamber of sensoric deprivation. It was the same, almost the same effect, and he describes this effect, and I translated this as the beyond the mirror glass, and this is from a Russian singer Boris Grebenshchikov. Is this are synonyms? Is this phrase because altered states and another side of the beyond the mirrored glass? Yes, almost the same. So, and this is.
I still in the corridor of the possible, so I do not convert what the author said. I just translate what the author said. And I have never think about allusion from the Alice in Wonderland, but I think it was really true. Thank you for reminding me. Yes, it's really cool. Grebenshchikov, it's our past, but Alice in Wonderland is forever young. He had a hobby to open the safes, and working in Manhattan on Manhattan project, where all secret code documentation was kept in the safes, and he tried to crack safes, and he cracked safes, and the word sniffer, it's the main word in this chapter, because sniffer, it's a criminal who specializes in cracking safes, and it turned out that most people had no idea who actually sniffer was. And but well, our previous president actually was a criminal, and everybody knew that he belonged to the sniffer class. Safe cracker means safe cracker, but sniffer was much more. People knew this word. Well, you know about the episode when Sharapov tells about the father of Manka Obligata, and in the English text we can read that it was easy for me to open the safe, and I translated that he just opens safe as if he takes he eats fruit, and you had to recognize this. As if he eats nuts from fruit, and it's senseless, and many people can know some phrases, but they forgot where they come from, and who said it and where it was said. This is from Pushkin, from Captain's Daughter. I belong to old school, and young people do not know, do not learn Russian literature now, and they do not recognize this allusion. When I was younger, I used to use this. I use this allusion quite often. So when I translate Feynman, and I knew that there is a good Russian translation done by Sergei Ilyin, I believe that you have to read translation done in other languages, and I always read translations done by other people into other languages before I translate books, and I have a kind of sparring. What is sparring? When you translate and you see how, for example, Eileen translated, another person translated, and if you win or if your translation loses, so thus this translator learns you somehow, and he becomes your tutor, your mentor, and it is much more useful to translate a book when a Russian or Polish translator, a co-translator, has already translated it. I think that Ukrainian language and Russian language are very close, and if, for example, you take a French translation, it will not be as close, and the effect will be, the achieved effect will be less. So the episode is like is as follows. Feynman and his bosom friend wrote an article, and another physicist, Teligdi, writes them that I wrote your article. The FG theory of beta decay is no FG. So FG theory is no FG. FG theory, it's the Feynman-Hillman's theory. And what is new FG? What is no FG? No. So yeah, your theory is no fucking good. How will you translate it? I translated it as the theory is not phenomenally. Then the score was equal. The context was as follows. Feynman was in the bar, and he was just picking up girls, and he was picking up girls, and then another guy comes there, enters the bar, and thinking, oh, who is Dick is. And Dick is taken into inverted commas. Dick is a denominative from Richard, and once it means a certain anatomic part of the body. And which what means the penis, and you would have translated what the penis is, picks up his girl, and the editor says only if I'm dead, and he wrote penis only if I'm dead. And when I showed this translation to another person, and we discussed whether this is what sort of lexics is it, whether it is an F language or not. And we've been struggling with this topic 3 days, and then I translated it the follows, and I translated it as the guy turns out to see what the dick is it, and what's the dick, it's a word that comes from Yiddish, and it means a little bit freaky, like there is a word schlimazel, and
it is not really possible to interpret it properly because there is just discussion of the variants of the translation into the Russian language. That we're sorry. Please, we'll stay silent, and we will get back when there will be general description of the process of the translation. This text is funny, regardless how you can interpret it and, for example, translate it, and they are in the hostel and they just talking about some geographical task, and his opponent tells him, and there are examples of the translation, and I understand Again, the discussion. He describes his work in the Manhattan projects before they had IBM, and the girls calculated that, and it was movie filmed about that. And now, again, the example about the speed of the IBM, and he just illustrates this in his translation. This is a contaminated lexis, technical lexis with the living beings, and now the English example. And now we're talking about the issue where could a translation be better than the source text, the original. I think that my translation is better than famous work, not because I'm better than famous, but we had different philological tasks. He did not compete with himself, but I competed with him, but he had just some bonuses. He was alive, and now he's not alive. He's dead, but I'm still alive. I'm still alive, and he was psychologically disabled, and he wasn't enrolled into the army. And he describes his dialogue with a psychiatrist, a shrink, in the military. Again, the example of the translation into Russian, into Ukrainian, sorry. And here the comical effect is made by the switching from the ordinary regime into the imaginary mode. And here you can see our main character. He is on pension. These are 80s. I have a Telegram channel, and we announce the price, and translators can make comments, and I asked this first aphorism. You can see it. I would rather have questions that can be answered, that answers that can be questions. You can translate it into the Ukrainian or the Russian language. You couldn't do this without the extemporizing. It's easy to understand, but it should be, the translation should be aphorism. And this famous response of Feynman. So, physicists like sex, sure, it may give some practical results, but that's not why we do it. And this is real. What was he awarded the Nobel Prize? He gave the tool to use the quantum mechanics, and this is a real diagram, famous diagram, and he explains here the myth of graviton with quantum fluctuation. And I understood that his quotes about physics and his ideas are in line. And what was it all about? What are we talking about? And what my mother was very far from the science, but she had a very good sense of humor, and due to that I know that the two highest form of knowledge is the love and compassion. Thank you very much. So, somebody, if you have any questions, you are welcome. I will give you the mic. Thank you very much. You talked about 31 days. Frankly speaking, taking into account the works you mentioned, I would like to ask you how many times you should read the original to finish the first draft of your translation. One. The reply is one. And the question was, you gave the example where the name of the chapter you can translate using one way or another, and this way I select at once. This is my idea, this is my approach. I take it at once, and usually you can assess which option is more apt to that, and if there are several options, I can leave it and I can use the translator's notes. And on any stage, for example, when you edit this 31 days, this is from the start start of this work till you send it to the editor, and of course you will have the opportunity to fix it or to correct it. And if I can expand your question, all this preparation for the book and can impress really. This is not for 31 days. It did not took, of course, something I knew before. And I read something when I was doing that, and I read something after, because this book will live long. And this is a very funny book and very good book, and I from time to time reread it, and if I find more appropriate option, and the question, and how much does this period from the when you translate till the moment you write the last translation page, 6 months, half a year. There is one more time I insert logo of UTIC. Here's my Telegram channel. If you are interested, please join. Any questions? Any more questions I would like to ask you? How Mr. Feynman could know the word rain dance, and you told that you replaced baseball terminology into the tennis terminology, and you also mentioned that the translation should educate people. And do you think that if you substitute it, replace it, what do you think about the educational function of the author? So, frankly speaking, I can give you the secret. I can tell you about the secret. We have only one baseball stadium in Ukraine, and so they can use the baseball terminology. Feynman wrote the book Tuva or Death. He really dreamt to get to, and I'm sure that this is in Siberia, and I'm sure that he knew that a rain dance. He should knew the language. This is a specific language. No. This is like, for example, the word Sputnik. It's international. So, a rain dance in Russian kamlati. It means the same. It's like a shaman of the Siberian tribe. And this is what the same as the Indian holy people do. And the question is, you intentively or you were bold and you insert your author elements like allusion or some changes which do not which cannot be compared with the original text. I don't know. Is it difficult to make solutions? You started it doing on the scratch when you started? No, in my first book I could not afford. I didn't know how to do it. This is my 25th book. I'm not just the first day married, and I'm not the first day translator. And of course I thought, and I came to the conclusion that this method can improve this book, can make this book better. If it could be another book, I wouldn't do it probably. This is the translation, this is ad hoc. We decided right now, and there are no universal solution for that.
Adelaida Kuznetsova, Belarus, Minsk. While I was listening to you, I thought that one of my first literary translation I did for Belarus journal, and I worked with editor very closely. He belonged to Latin American authors who was even cooler than Marcus, and he taught me that our reader, the author's text, must be clear, so clear that he just felt the atmosphere and he felt himself living in this village or and so on. And I was listening, and I thought if I knew Ukrainian and if I read this translation, I would feel myself directly there with all these people, all these digs, all these people in that epoch and in that place. And that is concerning. Yes, it was mentioned by the girls already. Yes, it's genius. It's really cool. Yes, it's true. Let me answer your question. As for if we change baseball into tennis, there are books which have to educate. I liked when Nalkovich and Abba Halamaha published Sherlock Holmes, and in the first chapter he translated it into Ukrainian, but the Ukrainian language would give it differently. And of course, but Sherlock Holmes does not have any educational, any pedagogical function. All these are books with a little bit belonging to other register. They are not for children and they are not for teenagers. I don't think I have to educate somebody, but actually it's what I'm doing. But maybe I'm just a little bit forward. Whether you have, do you have any experience in translating books for another ages, for people who belong to another ages? My dream is to translate cookery books and to translate children's books, but unfortunately usually I deal with translations about physics. Yes, I can speak using the language of children, but I specialize in scientific and in fiction literature. Oh, an interpreter can't hear. An interpreter can't hear. An interpreter can't hear. It feels like you're an interpreter can't hear. That you have known Mr. Feynman and you even became relatives. Yes, we are best friends. Imagine that for half an hour he is next to you. What topic would you like to speak about? What topic would you like to speak to raise if he were close to you? I would like to speak about him with him about women. I don't think I could speak about physics, but I think we could speak about women. I'm not a sexist anyway. We are all created equal, and we all want to be happy, strive for happiness. And women in this book, and actually he was married, and his first wife died, and they took separate and important place in the life of every man and in his life as well. But you know, this question is much more difficult than it seems to be. For example, I liked music of Gribenshikov, And Grебенщикov was a Bruce Lee fan of Bruce Lee. And when he was asked by a journalist, what would you like to ask Bruce Lee about, Grebенщикov said about nothing, because everything I wanted to ask him about, he answered in his film. And tell me, please, translations into Russian language. Yes, I translated into Russian one of the books about Ukrainian history of Ukraine. As for deeper, more comfortable, brighter, well, how do you feel with translation? It's easier for me to translate into Russian. I consider myself to be a virtuous translator, but it's easier for me to work with Russian because I graduated Russian school, but then due to my wife I started using Ukrainian more. I consider Ukrainian my mother tongue, but in philological viewpoint I know Russian language and I don't need much effort for using it. I'm bilingual. I speak and I think in two languages simultaneously, and when I translate, usually I translate using Russian language. It doesn't mean that I translate from Russian, but in my head there are two languages that function in my head, and these two languages enrich each other. When I'm relaxed and when you listen to me, you can see that I speak using two languages. When I have well, and when I'm using one language, I'm using allusions, jokes. So you can say that I'm rather virtuous using both of these languages. So more questions, please. We can discuss discuss in groups. Thank you, Mr. Mykola.